Morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on which time you're watching this. So this begins our first lecture via online learning, and we are now beginning chapter 10, and I'm going to lecture over section 1. I've attached the completed PowerPoint notes so that you can follow along with the lecture, but because I can't pull it up at the same time, I am just lecturing off the top of my head, hopefully in some order that makes sense. I also will get cut off at 15 minutes, and I will just probably continue to talk and get cut off. So if that happens, hopefully I can finish this in 15 minutes. So here's what we're going to do. I'll just start, and you can follow along. So section 1 is the beginning of World War I. So we have to kind of take a break and make sure we understand how World War I begins. It begins in Europe, and it begins as certain things are rising in Europe. One is nationalism. And again, we've talked about nationalism. It is usually, again, always politically seen as a negative. It is not patriotism. Nationalism is this strong belief that your country is superior at the cost of others. So we have a buildup of nationalism with all these other, with these different European countries. There hadn't really been a global or a European war in Europe since the end of Napoleonic Wars in 1815. So they've had over 100 years of relative peace, except for a couple of revolutions and the teeny tiny Crimea War. So no one's really remembered war, remember what it feels like. And so this heightened feeling of superiority reigns across Europe. At the same time, almost all nations now have had an industrial revolution, and they've built up these great industries of war. They built war machinery, war weapons, and so we have that buildup as well. And when you have nationalism at the same time as this buildup of arms, this arms race, it really can send alarms. Thirdly, we have alliances. We have these secret alliances. We have well understood alliances. And one of the things I kind of try to give us analogy is the show Survivor. Now, I don't watch it anymore. I don't even know if it's still on. It's been on an eternity. But at the beginning, when I watched Survivor, one of the things that was always the most fun was those alliances, right? When they went to the final vote out, and you were privy to who had made these open alliances, like we are friends, and then who had made all these alliances in secret. And that's what's happening in Europe. There's alliances between countries that are well known, and then there's secret ones. An alliance, when it comes to a country, is a hyper "we got your back" kind of message. If your country is in trouble, we come to your aid. If someone attacks your country, we come to your aid. If you feel that you're being threatened, we're alongside of you. So having an alliance doesn't just necessarily mean we're your friend. It also means we've got your back militarily. So that's what's setting up in Europe. We also have, with this rise of nationalism, different groups within empires that feel like they should be their own country. And that's what's happening in the Balkans. The Balkan Peninsula is full of little teeny countries, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Serbia, all these different countries that are ruled by the Austrian Habsburg Empire, by an emperor. He has a nephew called the Archduke. That's his title. His name is Ferdinand. And he is the heir to the throne because the emperor has no children. He doesn't really like the Archduke very much because, heaven forbid, he married a female, Sophie, that was way below his social class. And he doesn't really like him very much. And so anytime the Archduke can get out of town, the emperor is fine with it. So the Archduke makes a trip to a place called Serbia. And people in Serbia don't like him. They tell him, hey, if you come here, we're probably going to kill you. They send him messages, hey, if you come to our place, Belgrade, we're going to kill you. And as what happens most with people who feel very entitled, they decided they're going to go anyway. So he and his wife, Sophie, travel to Serbia. The mayor of the town meets him at the train station and says, look, He's covered, the mayor's got blood on him. They've already exploded pipe bombs. The mayor says, these people are going to kill you. Like, seriously, your parade route is in the newspaper. Everybody knows where you're going. Perhaps we should rethink this thing. So one of the things about an empire that makes it difficult to govern is that an empire means you are one big area with lots of different types of people that are different languages, different customs, different religions. Well, the drivers in the Archduke's motorcade were from all different nationalities, and the Archduke decided, well, we probably maybe should change the parade route and not go right where everybody thinks we're going to go so I don't get killed. And so he gives the new directions in German, auf Deutsch. And sadly, the driver of his car was Czechoslovakian, and he did not speak German. He spoke Czech, didn't get the memo. And so my dog's getting ready to drink. Every time I get on here, my dog drinks. Sorry about that. That's my dog gulping water. Anyway, so the Czech driver doesn't get the memo. He doesn't speak German, so he gets in the car with the Archduke. The Archduke is in a very slow-moving open car motorcade. He drives. The Czech driver goes the right way, figures as they get into this narrow road, oops, we went the wrong way. And as he's trying to back up, a member of the Black Hand, his name is Princip, comes up very close range and shoots the Archduke and his wife. And eventually they will die. It's a very small caliber gun, just like our other assassins that we've previously discussed. They've got very small capacity guns, and they don't kill instantly. But they die. So Austria says to Serbia, hey, we want Princip. We want to try him in Austria. And Serbia says, nope, he did the crime here. He's going to stay here. You're not going to get him. Austria said, yeah, we're going to take him. And if we're not, it's going to be big trouble. And so Serbia said no. And at that point, Austria declares war on Serbia. And that is how World War I begins. There's not a good guy, there's not a bad guy. And it's really important to remember that, especially as we discuss the role that the United States is going to play in World War I. There's not a good guy. Nobody's doing bad things. Somebody just gets assassinated. From that, Germany says to Austria, whatever you need, we got your back. Russia says to Austria, hey, these Serbs are our people. We're going to mobilize our troops, and you better stand down. France says, whoa, back up, Germany. You don't need to get involved. And then in the middle of all this, Germany decides to invade Belgium. Remember that, because that's important. And from there, we've got this dominoes, and eventually we have the beginnings of World War I. World War I is fought between the Central Powers, that's Germany, Austria, and the Ottoman Empire, that's the Turkish Empire, the Ottomans, and then the Triple Entente, that would be France, Great Britain, and Russia, and that will begin in 1914. So in 1914, we have this war that begins. One of the first things that the Germans do is begin patrolling the Atlantic in U-boats. And U-boats stand for Untersee, which is undersea. They're submarines, but they're called U-boats. And they begin this campaign of what they called unrestricted warfare. And that means any ship that these captains of these U-boats see, they're going to sink. Whether they're military ships, passenger ships, merchant ships, we're just going to sink them. And it's quite terrifying for the British and eventually the United States. So that becomes what the Germans will do first and foremost that has an effect on the United States, this unrestricted submarine warfare. They're shooting at anything. It doesn't matter what flag you're flying. They will shoot at anything. I'm checking my notes, so hold on a moment. Okay. So what will happen is that passenger ships will be sunk, two in particular. One that we're the most concerned with is the Lusitania. The Lusitania is an English ship, and it will be sunk. Later, we know that, yes, there were ammunitions and weapons of war on that ship, but at the time, it wasn't known, and Germany said so, but no one believed it. And so what is seen as Germany is sinking a passenger ship, kind of a Carnival cruise line, for lack of a better analogy. So you can imagine the outrage, especially in the United States. President Wilson says, Americans, you shouldn't be traveling across the Atlantic. I can't protect you. We're not getting in this war. So that's also very important at this point to understand that the United States has taken the position of neutrality. And the reason being is, number one, is what I already said. There's not a good guy or a bad guy. It's an assassination. Also, this is what our country at that time sees as a war of kings. This is not a war about democracy, not yet. It will get stated that way. But right now, we see it as this European war of kings. We don't have kings. We don't have emperors and kings and czars. And so let Europe do their thing and blow themselves up. We're going to sit across the ocean and watch and see what happens, and hopefully democracy will prevail. So 1914, we don't do anything. 1915, we don't do anything. That's when the Lusitania is sunk, and we kind of say, hey, Americans, you probably shouldn't be riding on these ships. And President Wilson presses Germany about that unrestricted warfare, and Germany says, okay, we'll stop. We'll try to make sure that the ships have flags that we're fighting against. And so Germany does that for a while. In 1916, nothing happens. And Wilson is now running for president in 1916. And Wilson's campaign slogan is, he kept us out of the war. We're not fighting in this war. We're not doing it. We're not fighting in it. We're not participating in it. And as a result, mostly of that political platform, Wilson is reelected president. So you have to ask, what the heck changes? Because we know we do fight in World War I. What the heck changes? Well, what changes is another sinking of a passenger ship, and this time it is a French ship called the Sussex. And Wilson is really, at this point, saying, Germany, you can't do this. You can't just sink ships with civilians on them. It is an act of aggression that we, as the United States, cannot ignore. At the same time, there is this incident known as the Zimmermann telegram. The Zimmermann telegram is a telegram from Field Marshal Zimmermann, who is an ambassador to Great Britain, to the United States, and he sends a telegram to the country of Mexico. And it's encoded, it's little numbers and bits of 4 numbers along the way, and the British are able to break the code. They've already broken the code quite a few years back, and so they're reading all of the telegrams and the messages going back and forth. Now, Britain has some difficulty, because if they give the telegram to the United States, then Germany knows they've broken the code, which means Germany will get a new code, and they have to work to break the other code. But at the same time, Britain really, really wants the United States to come into the war on the side of Great Britain. So we got to do a little asterisk. Part of the difficulty of the United States in World War I is that we are a nation of immigrants. There are hundreds and thousands of German immigrants, hundreds and thousands of Russians, of British, not quite as many French, but we're a nation of immigrants. And because, as I stated, there's not a bad guy, it's really difficult for the United States to pick a side. We, at this point, before the Zimmermann telegram, could have just as easily picked the side of the Germans, because there's not a bad actor in this war. So that's part of Wilson's thing. We're just staying out. We're a nation of immigrants. I'm not doing this until the Zimmermann telegram. So the Zimmermann telegram is encoded or decrypted by the British, again with this difficulty. Did we tell the United States what this says, and risks letting the Germans know we've broken their code? And they decide, yeah, we got to tell the United States, because basically what the Zimmermann telegram says is to Mexico, we need you to come in on our side and fight on the side of the Central Powers. And when we win, we will allow you to take back the territory that the United States has taken from you during the Mexican-American War, and any other territory that you think that should be yours. And that would be Texas, California, New Mexico, Arizona. And when this is published, this outrages the American population. And this is seen as the incident or the event that propels the United States into World War I, the Zimmerman telegram. So on April 2nd,